And so with that, let's get going, and I can pull up our slides, and we can jump right into our presentation. So as I mentioned before, today my name is Javier Hernandez. I'm part of the Google Civics outreach team, and we're going to be going through some Google tools that you all could be using for your organizations and your initiatives to really reach more people on our platform or through our platforms. And with that, let's jump right in. So just to give you a little bit of background on myself, I already told you my name and the team that I work for. The Civics outreach team at Google exists to try to help folks in the civic space better utilize Google products, right? So we are your one-stop shop for all things best practices through Google products. We have resources that we make available to you through presentations here, but also through our website and other things like newsletters that we make available, so that you can stay up to date on all the best practices that you could be using to really maximize the impact of your objectives and your organization's mission. Some background about myself: I'm Cuban, born in Cuba, raised in South Florida, in Miami, Florida. I spent most of my career prior to joining tech working in political communications, originally working on congressional campaigns and statewide legislative campaigns in Florida. And then moved up to DC to work on the Hill as a communications director for a member from Florida as well. And then ultimately, I did a little bit more campaign work and then jumped over to tech. So I've used many of the products that I'm going to be talking about. I've been in many of your positions as communicators. So I'm hoping that I can share some of my experience, and both the experience that I bring from my political communications days, but also the experience I've managed to gain while working in tech as well. And then just a little bit more about myself. Some of my hobbies just include surfing, hiking, traveling, photography, also do some boxing here and there. So that's just a little bit about myself. So let's jump right into it. Just to share the agenda that we're going to be covering today quickly. I'm going to make sure that I cover how you all should be setting up your Google accounts to make sure that they're as secure as possible. As you've seen in the news as of late, hackers are really going after vulnerable accounts and vulnerable individuals to try to leverage the information that they might gain from you, either for financial gain or for other nefarious reasons. So it's really important that you all are taking the steps necessary to secure all of your digital assets through Google. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about search and how you all could be maximizing how you're appearing on search. And then lastly, or no, I'm sorry, not lastly, then we're going to get into just ways that you could be improving your website through Google website tools. So things like analytics, for example, that you could be using to really get a better understanding of how folks are interacting with your website. Next, we're going to be talking about email campaigns and how you could prevent your emails from ending up in the spam folders of Gmail and Workspace users. Then briefly, we're going to talk about political ad authorization. And if any of you are planning on using some of your resources to advertise through Google to reach your stakeholders, I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about how you're actually going to get set up to do that. And then lastly, just going to touch briefly on the Google for Nonprofit. Depending on what your tax status is for your organization, you might qualify for Google for Nonprofit services, which are free services that you're going to be able to access that are typically paid for other users if you are a 501c3 nonprofit. So I'm just going to cover that and try to get through it as quickly as possible so that we can leave plenty of time for questions as well. So just jumping into how you could be securing your accounts. The first thing that you all should be thinking about is how you're structuring the management of your different assets. If you all have a YouTube channel, if you will have a primary email that you are asking folks to respond to or to reach out to for communications, you want to make sure that you are creating a comms at or press at whatever your organization's domain is, or something info at whatever that might be, to manage your digital assets, right? So that could be everything from your YouTube channel, your search console account that you use to manage your website and your knowledge panel on Google. Just something that is going to control all of your different assets, that is going to be separate from your individual employee accounts. right? Through most of Google's tools, you're actually able to control access, right? So if your YouTube channel is owned by that comms at your organization's domain account, you can still grant access to individual staffers so that they can access those tools without having complete control of it, so that when that person leaves your organization or transitions to other work, you can still have primary access to it. As well as each of those employees still have the appropriate level of access to those channels to be able to do their work. And then lastly, you have your personal Google account. These are things that obviously you can still use. We would not recommend mixing those if necessary, if possible, right? You can still access, like, go watch your organization's YouTube videos while logged into your personal Google account. You can still do your regular search, access certain Drive stuff, but really I would recommend managing your assets in those two first buckets that I talked about. And here are ways that you could be securing each of those. So when it comes to that shared organizational account, you're not going to be able to set up two-factor authentication, which is what we recommend you do at the individual staffer account level, right? You are going to want to set really strong passwords, right? And then save those passwords in a password manager, not a spreadsheet, not a notes document. Don't send it via text or email in plain text, right? You really want to make sure that you are securing that as best as possible, so that no one outside of the people who absolutely need access to that account have it. And I would also suggest that you limit who has access to that password, right? So if you know that for that organizational account that's going to own those assets, limiting access to that account to your executive director, communications director, or just those folks that you know are going to be good stewards of those accounts. And then just adding other folks as managers, editors, whatever you need to each of those individual accounts. Now, at the staffer account level, you do, and the personal, you really want to make sure that you're enabling two-step verification. That's going to be where you receive a text message to your mobile device, or you can set it up through an authenticator app where you can enter the app and pull a code that you'll have to enter whenever you initiate a new session on that account. That's going to be the best way for you to prevent bad actors from gaining access to the account, even if they have your login information and password, right? Because if they don't have the physical device that's tied to that account, they won't be able to access it. So really encourage all of you to do that as well. And then if for whatever reason you feel that there is your account might have been compromised and you want to look into the back end of your account and see if there's been any issues, Google offers tools that you can use to do that by going to g.co/security checkup. Here you'll be able to access our security checkup tool. There you can enable two-factor authentication if you haven't already. You can look at what devices are tied to your sign into your account, right? So if you look there and you see that there's an Android device logged into your account and you don't own any Android devices, or vice versa, right? Then you might want to end the session for that particular account, enable two-factor authentication, and change your password for good measure. Same thing with recent security events. We've had folks reach out to us and be like, something's up with my account. I don't know, who might be logged into it, right? Well, in recent security events, you can actually see if Google has registered any suspicious activity. If someone's logged into your account from Croatia and you've never been to Croatia, then that might be an indicator that it's time to update your password, enable two-factor authentication, and end any other sessions. And then lastly, third-party access. Nowadays, it's very common for folks to log in to apps using your Google account, right? So just for ease of login. But some of these third-party applications may, one, not be secure, or the third-party applications that appear here might not be a service that you're familiar with. This is a great way for you to control exactly what third-party applications have access to your account and eliminate those that you're not familiar with or you no longer feel secure about. And then moving on to how you all are going to be appearing on search. So first, just going really quickly over just what you see when you search something, right? So here's a very general search for George Washington. Many of you are familiar with this kind of page. What you see at the very top there is the very first thing that you see grayed out is a Google ad. That is typically the first thing that you'll see at the very top of a Google search. followed potentially by some top stories, and then organic search results. On the right, if you're searching on desktop, and near at the top, if you're on mobile, oftentimes for certain entities, individuals, and organizations, you'll see what's called the knowledge panel. Many of you are familiar with it. You might not know the name, but it's called the knowledge panel. It's basically a curated collection of authoritative information about those entities, individuals, or organizations. It's going to feature biographical information. It's going to feature relevant searches, but also things like past work. If that individual's ever written a book, if that individual's ever directed a movie, stuff like that. And that's going to be that it applies also for organizations. So general historical information about the organization, other relevant information. So this is automatically generated through search based on the publicly available information that appears in our search knowledge graph. So it won't populate for each organization. If you are a politician or an organization that does not have a knowledge panel when you search for yourself or organization, that's okay. That's based on the volume of searches that are out there, the available information that's out there. So one of the things that we recommend is, if you don't have a knowledge panel yet, that's perfectly fine. Just as your organization is searched more regularly, as more of your information is cited on news articles, or you appear more prevalently on online search results, you may see a knowledge panel pop up that you'll then be able to claim. So claiming a knowledge panel is essentially when you click that button on the bottom right, and you become the authoritative voice for this entity, right? So that means that when you panel, the reviewers are going to take a look at those suggestions much more closely, and they're likely to be adopted more quickly and more easily, right? So that can be the way you go about doing that is clicking on that button on the bottom right that I talked about, logging into the Google account that you want to claim that knowledge panel from, right? And then verifying that you are the owner of that knowledge panel. Usually the easiest way that will happen is you log into your Twitter account or some other social media account channel that is tied to that knowledge panel. Or if you've already claimed your website through Google Search Console, you can also log into Search Console to verify yourself and claim that knowledge panel. Once you've done that, you'll have the ability to make suggestions, authoritative edits to the knowledge panel. That can be everything from if your organization just recently changed its name, right, and you want to update that, you can do so. If you want to update you just change your logo and you want to update the featured image on the knowledge panel, you can do that. You want to change any of the other information that appears on there, you can do so as well. And really relevant for you all, if you want to update social media links, if you see that you have your Twitter and Facebook account featured in your knowledge panel, but not a YouTube, your YouTube link, you can also add that in there and all that other stuff. So that's where it's going to be really relevant. Now, if you all have a physical location as well, let's say you opened up your office, or you have several offices across the country, and you want to make sure that folks can find information about that office very easily, either to call in and ask for information or services, or to volunteer, whatever it might be, you can also claim the business profiles or create a business profile for your organization. Right. This is when you search on Google Maps, when you search on Google search, that location-based information that'll appear for those entities. That's essentially what that is, and it's done through Google My Business. So one, you can go into Google My Business and claim an organizational listing that's already featured in Google My Business, or you can create a new one and have it pop up on search as well. Right. So once you've done that, and you can do that by going to I believe it's business.google.com, and you will be able to create a business account, claim any existing listings, or create a new one. And once you've done that, you're able to make those edits through mobile, make them online, and you can claim multiple businesses, right? So if you have different locations across the country, you can do that. All we're going to ask you to do is request a postcard that'll be mailed to that specific location. Then you'll be able to verify that you're the owner of this organization and business location, and then you can update office hours, change address, do any of that. So that will cover you on that front. One thing I will flag, if you don't have a physical location, you are unable to create a Google My Business listing. So even though you might want to appear on search, unless you have an actual physical location that provides in-person services, you will not be able to create a business listing at the moment. Granted, I know that we're all anticipating the post-pandemic world is equally. So if you expect that you will be providing services and consultations at your offices post-pandemic, just hold off till then, and then submit that, create that business listing. It'll get approved. You can get it verified, and then you can update that information so that it appears on search and maps. So again, yeah, google.com/business is where you're going to get started there. And then before I get here, I'm just going to check to see. Great. And then what are some other tools that you could be using to maximize search, right? Google search and everything that it offers. One of them is Google Trends. Google Trends is how we gauge the level of interest on particular search topics or terms, right? So if you go to trends.google.com, you'll actually be able to see what the most popular search terms and topics are globally. You can do it down at the national level for the US. You can even do it regionally, right? So by state, you can do it even within metropolitan areas and geographic areas, regional areas within states. So how is this helpful to you all? On a whole bunch of different ways. So one of them is, as you're thinking about how you're optimizing your YouTube content, right? You might be trying to make decisions about what type of video you're creating, what your stakeholders might actually be interested in hearing about. Search Trends provides you a great opportunity to know what people are actually looking for. You can even go and if you know that you want to create a video on a particular topic, you can actually search for that topic or the specific trends the specific terms that you're thinking about, and actually see what the level of interest relative to other search terms is for that specific topic, right? So it'll give you a good idea on, like, well, we know that we work on several different issues, but of the issues that we work on, the one that folks have been really most interested in recently has been immigration. So maybe we should do a video on immigration, and more specifically, they're asking about this. They're looking for this topic on immigration. So maybe we should do that. And then also in our video title, make sure that we're using the terms that are being searched most regularly, because even within a topic, right, the way that folks are searching for things is relevant. So if folks are looking for gun reform much more often than they're looking for gun control or something like that, then you might want to incorporate that into how you're writing your video title, how you're writing out the description of the video on the bottom, and the tags that you're using for your videos. Same applies for content on your website. If you're putting on you're going to throw a one pager or an information page on your website, you want to make sure that the language that you're using is consistent with what people are actually searching for, so that it's more likely to appear at the top of search, right? Other things that you all could be thinking about is also, I'm going to talk about ads authorization at the very end of this presentation. But as you're thinking about what keywords you want to target, this is really helpful to determine what things people are actually searching for. And Google's ad tool does a pretty great job at trying to match user intentions and searches with the keywords that you put forward, even if they don't match one-to-one. But this is still a good way to get a good sense of what you should actually be targeting for. And again, more broadly, I think also for me, when I was doing communication strategy, I was looking at this as a way to get a general sense of where people's heads are actually at, so that you can then choose where to focus your time and energy as far as what you're trying to communicate. So again, this is just an example of what it might look like. You can also compare topics, right? So you can do a comparative search where you might enter immigration, healthcare, economy, education, and then instead of doing it over the past 12 months, here we have an example of Iowa, but you can set any state. You can even go down to the regional level. Instead of doing the past 12 months, you could do the last week, the last month, the last day, right? You can do you can choose to do web search. You can even narrow it down by YouTube search, right? So if you want to see what's trending on YouTube specifically and not just Google search or Google and YouTube search together, you can break it down to that level as well. So this is all going to be really helpful for you all as you're thinking through that. And then the other tool that I think you all should be utilizing, and many of you do, because all my friends that when I worked in campaigns, I did it, and all my friends who still work on campaigns use it. But Google News Alerts, this is a really good way for you all to stay on top of any breaking news, both about your organization, your campaign, or whatever that might be, but also on general topics that you all are tracking for, right? So if you specifically focus on one advocacy area and you want to follow trends on either a court decision that you're tracking for, or anything else that might be relevant to you, you can actually set custom searches on keywords, and it'll update you either by email as it publishes. It can send you a wrap up email at the end of the day or at the end of the week, or just on everything that's populating, and that can be news articles, that can be blog posts, that can be pages that have been uploaded on websites. You can really pick and choose what you want to receive updates on. And one of the things that this was really helpful for me, and I used to use it for, was to also collect snippets that I was sending around to our team, at the beginning of the next day or at the end of the week, whatever the most relevant snippets. So that can also simplify that process for you as well, so that you and your entire team are staying up to date on what's happening on the things that are important to you. Now, going into ways that you could be improving your website and really optimizing your website. The first of those is going to be Google Analytics, right? And I'm not sure how many of you are already familiar with analytics, but once you connect your website to Google Analytics, you're going to have access to just a plethora of different data that can inform how you're building your website, how you're organizing your website, and just get some insights on what people are actually looking for from your organization or website, right? So an example of that might be, if you know that looking at the back end of your analytics, right, you see that you have 500 monthly visitors or 1,000 monthly visitors to your website each month, right? And then of those visitors, 50% of those are just looking for your contact information, which they have to scroll down to the end and then click a contact us link, right? You might now determine that in order to make sure that folks who are trying to reach you actually reach you, you might move that contact information closer to the top of the website, or you might make it more prominently featured, or add a pop-up link that will allow folks to directly go and email your organization. If you know that the most popular link on your website is an FAQ on a particular policy issue, right? If you are working on immigration and you have a one pager with really helpful information for undocumented folks, right? And you know that that's your most popular link, then maybe you might want to feature that more prominently in your website, or if it's buried deep down somewhere, make it more prominently featured. So that's just really helpful. Other things that you might want to look out for is, how long the sessions are, right? Like, if people are coming to your website, how much time are they spending on each individual page? The bounce back rate, if your website, for instance, is not loading quickly, or it just has way too much going on and it's hard for people to find what they're looking for, and they're just exiting your website immediately, you might want to start thinking about how you restructure how your website appears and where the information shows. Yeah, and again, same thing I talked about. So the way that you can get set up in Google Analytics is really simple. You can just go to our analytics website, which is analytics.google.com, and then just hit sign up. Then you're going to just enter all the relevant information about your organization, your website, organization name, category, all of that. And then you are going to be given a tracking ID. For those of you who are administering your website yourself, you're going to need to, and there's instructions online of how you can do that. You're going to need to enter this tracking ID code into your website code. If you all have webmasters that are managing your sites, or you're paying for that service externally, just make sure to send that to them and ask them to add the line of code for Google Analytics to your website. And once they do that, you'll be able to start receiving information about your website through Google Analytics. And one of the things that you all could be using, if you're a small shop, or you really don't want to dig into every little aspect of Google Analytics, and you just want to get a broad overview of how your website is performing, we actually created a Google Data Studio one-sheeter template that you could be utilizing, right? Once you go to the template, and we'll make sure to provide this after the presentation. Once you go to the template, you can make a copy of it and then tie it to your Google Analytics account for your website, and you'll actually it'll populate with all of the information that you see here. So this is really helpful if you need to report up to your executive director, or you just want to be able to skim some of the most relevant data about your website decisions going forward. So just make sure that you're utilizing this. It's really simple to use. It'll even break down where people are visiting your website from and stuff like that. So now, one of the most important considerations as far as website goes that you all should be thinking about is the speed of your website, right? How long is the website taking to load? So 53% of visitors are abandoning a site if it doesn't load, if it takes longer than 3 seconds to load on mobile, right? So you should really be testing your website regularly, how quickly it's loading. Are you putting way too much stuff on your homepage that's making it, taking it longer to load than it probably should? Could you be optimizing for mobile? Should you have a mobile site separate from your desktop site with that might be more bare bone but loads quicker so that folks can actually access those resources? Those are all things that you should be thinking about. And one of the ways that you can actually test how quickly your website is loading on mobile is to go to this resource here. It's g.co/test my site. And this will give you it'll speed test your website, and from there you can optimize for that. So if you know that the site is taking on average 4 to 5 seconds to load, that's way too long. And you might want to just either rework your website, or as I mentioned before, maybe open a mobile site that will direct folks if their IP is telling your website server that they're visiting from a mobile device. So it's going to be really helpful for you all as well. Now, talking about email, I know for many of you, email is really going to be your bread and butter, right? It's going to be how you're going to be fundraising. It's going to be how you're going to deliver updates to your stakeholders, and just stay in touch with your folks as well. There are a lot of different considerations to take in mind here. One of the things that I will tell you all right off the top is that Gmail and even Gmail through Workspace have sender limits, right? So if you all are considering sending, you have campaigns that are going to be 50,000 emails strong, right? Gmail or Gmail for Workspace might not be the best option for you all, right? Now, that doesn't mean that you still can't use these services to do email communications with your stakeholders, but just keep that in mind as you're thinking about whether or not you want to utilize a mass marketing vendor to send out your emails and stuff like that. But other considerations that are really important for you to think about, even if you are going to go that route, Gmail, many users are still using Gmail as their primary email service, right? So you want to make sure that no matter where you're sending your emails from, you're optimizing them so that they don't end up in the spam folder, right? Currently, by default, Gmail sorts emails that users receive, right? So you might have your primary inbox, but you'll also have the social, promotion, updates, and forum inbox, right? And emails will be sorted based on information that our systems and signals that our systems receive from the text as well as sender of that email, right? So if we know that an email is being sent from a retailer, and the text of that email includes promotional offers, right? 25% off on a hat or whatever that might be, an electronic. That email is very likely to be sorted by our systems into the promotion folder, right? Same thing goes for updates and social forum. And then on top of that, that might also be determined by user signals. So if you're trying to update someone on news, but you are also tying in promotional sale for a t-shirt for a fundraising drive that you have, that might complicate things, and your email might actually just end up in the promotion box that folks might not tend to check as often. Other things that you should be considering, if folks are not engaging with your email and they are manually marking it as spam, it's very likely that your future emails could also end up on spam. So be very careful about how you're writing your emails, what email address you're sending it from. So yeah, this is just some examples, but I can go into it. Just some common reasons why your email might actually end up in the spam folder. The first is if the link details on spam content, including asking for personal and confidential information. So anytime you're asking for something from users, right? Like share, tell us, give us your name, give us your address, something like that. That is commonly used by scammers and spammers to phish users. Your emails could potentially end up in spam. So avoid at making those kinds of asks during your email. If you're going to do that, just direct folks to a different site where they might be able to do that. If the URL of the link doesn't match the description of the link, right? So making sure that if you say, click here on this link to help with X cause, and then the web page that it leads to doesn't have anything about that, it's basically your fundraising page, that might also result in your email ending up in spam. So make sure that even you're being very transparent about what you're actually asking folks to do when you ask them to click on a hyperlink, and make sure that it's matching the site that you're sending them to. And then also making sure that you are matching that the all the information that's going into the inbox in terms of who the email is actually from, right? The message header includes information about who's sending the email, what domain is coming from, right? A bunch of that back end information is going to be included in the email header, right? That you won't see unless you kind of expand and dig into it. But making sure that even if you're using a third party mass marketing tool, that the from line is consistent with what's actually being communicated through the header. And then lastly, if you are using Google, and I believe you can do this even through other marketing channels, as long as you do it for your domain, making sure that you're authenticating your email and domain if you're using Workspace or so basically what that is your domain has a signature that it can attach to individual emails. So once you authenticate your domain and set it up with your email, each email that you send will have that signature and will communicate to our system that this is a legitimate sender and not just someone who's trying to spam or scam the recipient of that email. So what could you be using to solve for some of the common issues with email delivery? So the Postmaster tool is going to be your friend, right? The Postmaster tools are essentially a system that you can use that will tell you certain things. For example, what is the bounce back rate of your email? How trusted is your email, right? So you'll actually be able to see how many of the addresses that you are sending emails to consider your domain and your email addresses trustworthy or suspicious or just straight up spam, right? So, and if you see that those the number of recipients that are considering you spam or suspicious is inching up, then you might want to take a look at what type of language you're using in your email or whether or not you're using any of these practices, and a bunch of other great information and insightful data that you can use to figure out how your emails are actually landing, even if you're not using a marketing tool that will give you access to some of that information as well. So yeah, again, this is some of the stuff that you can do through Postmasters. See if people are marking your email as spam. It'll also give you recommendations of if you aren't following some of the best practices that we've outlined here, and then just some other really helpful information. So what can you do to make sure that your emails are being classified correctly when you're sending them out to Gmail users and Workspace users? One of the best things that you can do is actually break down where you're sending your emails from, right? So if you regularly send out a newsletter, then whenever a court decision is issued or something major breaks in Washington, you send out an email to your newsletter subscribers or your stakeholders to update them on what's happening. And you're also going to solicit them for money or volunteering opportunities. Breaking that up and sending those emails from different email addresses within your domain is going to really make sure that they end up in the appropriate folder, so that maybe folks don't really check their promotions folder that often, but they will check their updates one or forum one, right? So making sure that you're at least giving your emails an opportunity to reach your stakeholders. Yeah, and then avoid mixing up different categories. If you are making a fundraising solicitation at the bottom of your email, but really what you're hoping to get out of it is just to update your subscribers about something major that happened within your organization, we would recommend breaking those up into two separate emails, or just prioritizing or determining what the most important thing that you're trying to communicate in that email is, or what you're trying to achieve is, and then making sure that you are optimizing the language for that objective, right? So that it's more likely to end up in that right folder. And then if you're making if you're sending a news update, but it ends up in the promotions folder, which people don't check regularly, it might just be completely missed by your subscribers. Now, getting into something that you all might be using, not all of you, but some of you all might be thinking about, is advertising, right? For obviously, Google search is one of the most powerful search tools in the world, and organic search is still a really great way to get your information in front of folks who are looking for it, right? But sometimes you want to make sure that you are appearing in search for searches that might not be one-to-one tied to your organization name, or specifically the issue that you're working on, right? But you still want to get your fundraising information in front of folks. You still want to get your website information in front of folks. Google Ads are a really helpful way to do that. Obviously, that's search is not the only way to do that. There's several different advertising tools that you could be using. Google search is obviously one of the most popular and utilized within this space, but you also have YouTube ads, which you could be utilizing, and that's everything from 3 to 6 second non-skippable ad to 15-second, 30-second, 2-minute, 5-minute ads or beyond, that you could be utilizing on YouTube to build awareness about the work that you're doing and your brand. And then you also have Google display ads, which are essentially the ads that you see when you go to some of the most popular websites across the internet. That could be CNN, that could be the New York Times, any website that has opted in to our search network or site network to receive and host those ads. You'll be able to place them on there, either targeting them specifically or by just targeting specific areas or broad topics. And our systems will do the work to try to place them in the most appropriate locations. So those are going to be, GIFs, images, stuff like that, those banners that you see when you visit those websites, that's what display ads are going to be. So for you all to, and here's an example of how that actually looks. On the left, you see a search ad, it appears on mobile, the very top of search. In the middle, that's just, standard YouTube video, but that's where it'll appear. You can have videos that appear at the beginning of videos, mid videos, at the end of videos, all of that. And then the display ad that you see on the right, those are those banners that I talked about. And those display ads can also appear at the bottom of YouTube ads, as they have a display slot as well. And then now going into the political and policy, the political ad policy that we have here at Google. So any organization, so that includes political organizations, political parties, political issue advocacy organizations, any of that are going to be talking about issues and elections, are going to need to go through a verification process. So while we oftentimes use the term political ad, even if you're providing, let's say, and this doesn't apply to all services, but if you're doing both service work and advocacy work in your political ads, you'll still need to be, based on certain keywords that'll trigger, you'll still need to get verified as an organization and as an individual to run these ads. So what does that typically look like? So the way that you'll actually go about doing this is you will need to access the Google Ads platform, right, and create an account if you don't already have one. If you do, you can add in your ad account and connect it to your website and all of that. Then you're going to need to get verified as an organization. That's going to require that you submit a W-9 and some other additional information for us to review that you are who you say you are. And that's going to take about 4 to 7 days to complete. Then once you've completed the organizational verification step, you're going to need to verify yourself as a as an individual. So that's going to require some sort of legal U.S. Resident verification with a government issued ID. And once you have completed all of that, that's going to take about 3 to 5 days to review. And then once you've been reviewed on both and approved on both fronts, you should be able to run political ads and advocacy ads without them being blocked. So great. And then lastly, before I jump into questions, I want to talk briefly about Google for nonprofits. If any of you are working for 501c3 organizations, you are going to have access to some free tools through Google that are going to be really helpful for your organization. So the first of those tools is going to be Workspace for nonprofits, right? So essentially, you will get the equivalent of what is the entry point level of Workspace. So Workspace, some of you might have been familiar with G Suite. G Suite is now Workspace, so it's the enterprise product for Google, right? So that's going to give you access to things like Drive and additional storage and some of the other tools that come with Workspace for free. And it will also, as a nonprofit, if you sign up, you'll get the kind of lowest level of Workspace for free, but you'll also have access to discounted rates of the higher levels of service through Workspace. Yeah. So again, yeah, that's and usually G Suite Basic, which is now Workspace, was $5 a month per user. You'll get that for free through this program. Ad grants. So if you are a 501c3 nonprofit, as I mentioned, you'll also have access to $10,000 a month in Google ads that you can utilize to promote your organization and your mission. These are only going to be for Google search ads. So no YouTube ads, no display ads or anything like that. So that's $10,000 that you can use per month. They don't stack. So if you don't use $10,000 this month, you don't have $20,000 next month. But you can use up to $10,000 a month in search ads that you can use to fundraise, to build volunteer operations, to drive people to your website, all of that. So that's really, really useful for if you're in the nonprofit space. Next, the YouTube for Nonprofits program. This is less useful now during the pandemic because one of the great tools that you actually had access to spaces within our offices, right? So there are spaces across all of our different offices globally where we allow folks that are part of this program to actually come in and enter and shoot their videos from these really great curated spaces with professional equipment and all of that. But we're hoping that post-pandemic we'll reopen up those spaces so folks in this program can utilize them as well. But one thing that you all can still utilize, and it's going to be really helpful, is once you sign up for the YouTube for Nonprofits program, you'll be allowed to include donation cards in your videos. So as you post videos on your YouTube channel, you can actually add in a donation card that will appear within the video that folks can click on to then head to make a donation through the product. And then lastly, and this I don't imagine will be so relevant for folks here, you also get some credit for Google Earth and Google Maps. This is if you're trying to build a custom map or overlay using the Google Maps infrastructure. And if any of you have questions about that, I'm happy to answer them, but I don't imagine it's going to be as relevant for folks here in this presentation. So what's the eligibility requirement for the Google for Nonprofit program? As I mentioned, you have to be a 501c3 organization, and then you have to agree to all the program terms and conditions, right? And then there are also some exemptions to that. So no government entities or organizations, no hospitals or healthcare organizations, and no school or academic institutions or universities. There are other programs and services for folks that fall within that bucket. And if you want to sign up for this program and access it, just visit google.com/nonprofits to access all of these different services. And I'm happy to answer questions about it if any of you have some as well. So our team fields requests from folks. Not everything and not all organizations or requests fall within our team's scope, right? So that's not to say that if you reach out to this alias that you see here, we're necessarily going to be the right team to help you. But if you are trying to if you're curious about whether or not you fall within our scope and you want our help, just feel free to reach out to us. We'll make sure to communicate if we're unable to help, but that's a contact email that you should keep in your back pocket in case you do need help on any of the different products that fall within Google. So search, YouTube, Maps, any of that stuff. So with that, I want to just open it up for questions from you all. And then I will if you give me a second, I'll read through some of these questions here and I'll try to answer them, but feel free to just keep dropping questions in the chat and I will try to get to them with the time that we have left. I'll make sure to work through Netroots to make this presentation available to you all. If not the presentation, at the very least, the resources that we link to in the presentation, just to make sure that you all have them. Great. I see Nikki already dropped those in there. Hey, Nikki. Awesome. So I don't see any other questions. But I can talk through and see if there's any frequently asked questions that we do receive. So I already talked about knowledge panels and how for some of you, knowledge panels may not appear when you search for your organization name. As I mentioned, there's no way for us to be able to force a knowledge panel to appear if it doesn't do so naturally. So just make sure to just keep monitoring search results. And once a knowledge panels appear and you're able to claim it, you'll be able to add in that information. And I see we got a question from Jenny. Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, Jenny. So any of those types of requests, we're happy to help you with. If you can just email civics-outreach@google.com, we'll be able to take a look at that. So our team covers any product support for folks in the civic space. So that includes all products like search, YouTube, Maps. So and any of those policy questions that you have, if we're not the right team to be able to address them, we'll make sure to get them to the right team so that you can get the support that you need. And on site indexing, we do have some resources on that. Just make sure to email us and we can share that with you. And as far as knowledge on the resources that we've talked about before, we also have a team website that has many of the resources that I talked about here today. That website is civicsresources.withgoogle.com. And I'm sure Nikki will drop that here in the chat in a second. I don't have access to drop in stuff in the public chat as far as I can tell. But we have our website, civicsresources.withgoogle.com, actually has one-pagers. It's where you can access webinars that our team does regularly. So towards the beginning of the pandemic, we were actually doing, I believe it was weekly at the beginning, if not, and then we transitioned to a bi-weekly and now monthly webinars where we cover a whole host of different things. So if you want to find a video where we do a deep dive into analytics, that was hosted by actually our analytics evangelist here at Google, so a product expert at Google who covers this product specifically, you can access that resource. We have some on security, we have some on search and YouTube specifically. So just make sure that you visit our site and access all those resources as well. And I know we have, so on the ad grant question, depending on what your organization is and what you focus on, I would recommend reaching out to our alias, our team alias, civics.outreach@google.com. I'm happy to help direct you to the right resources. There are as part of the Google for Nonprofits platform, you do have access to some support, right? And there's ways that you can reach out to the Google for Nonprofit team specifically to get information on how you should be utilizing these tools and all that. But if you have specific questions that we might be able to answer for you, just feel free to reach out to us and we'll either get you to the right resource or be able to answer them for you. And on actually following up on ad grants, our team has done presentations on the Google for Nonprofit program specifically, which does include some best practices on how to utilize ad grants effectively, right? So how you should be thinking about structuring your campaigns, how you should be thinking about keywords, and dividing like your investment for your based on your objectives. So if you reach out to us, I'm happy to also share those resources as well. So Jocelyn, on knowledge panels, yeah, so if you just search for your organization and if you see that your knowledge panel has a claim this knowledge panel button on the bottom right, that means that knowledge panel has not been claimed yet, and you're able to claim it so that you can make those authoritative edits to the information that appears on there, whether you're trying to update the featured image that appears on a knowledge panel, whether you're trying to change some of the information. I guess it'll be not biographical in this instance, but just some of the general information that appears for your organization. You're able to do that once you've completed the verification process. If you do not see that claim your knowledge panel button, yet you don't know that anyone has actually claimed your knowledge panel, it might have been a former staff member, it might have been something like that. Feel free to reach out to us and we can help you try to figure out, or to get your knowledge panel claimed and owned by an account that you actually have access to. So with Masha, I know we don't have a whole lot of time left. I'll just take this last question. So I don't know if you can expand. I'll start answering, but if you can expand on your question just a little bit while I kind of give an answer to what I think the question is. As far as the things that I talked about today, I think it's holistic, right? You should be utilizing if email is a very important part of your mission, right? If you're using email to fundraise and build support for your organization, making sure that you're taking the time to optimize how you're writing your emails, how you're sending your emails, all of that is going to be really important. If you are really trying to invest your resources on YouTube, and obviously I think every single one of your organizations should be on YouTube and should be creating content regularly to try to engage with folks. YouTube search is the second most utilized search engine after Google search, right? So that means that folks are spending time on YouTube oftentimes when they want information about a topic, right? So let's say your organization focuses on immigration, and I've used that as an example because I just think some of these tools are so helpful to get good information out. Let's say your organization focuses on immigration, and you know that people are going to go to YouTube to try to find information on what a particular law that was just passed in a state means for their families, right? You might be able to then utilize YouTube to go in and explain what that actually means for these individuals, right? And utilizing Google Trends to figure out how you're going to write the title for that video, how you're going to, what keywords you're going to try to work into the description and the tags that you're using. So I really think all of these different tools should be utilized in tandem to make sure that you're achieving your overall objectives. And I think if I hope I answered your question. And with that, feel free to chat me up in the through Socio. Happy to follow up with you. Oh, on analytics, I guess I'll just add on that. On analytics, I would probably try to focus on like how much time people are spending on your website. If they go to your website and they leave within a couple of seconds and not spending very much time on it, I might try to look at what type of presentation you have on the front end on your website. And then I would also look at what popular links exist on your website, right? And whether or not they're buried somewhere in your website or they're very prominently featured. If you know that there are particular areas that you want to drive people to and they're not getting clicked, just making sure that you are structuring your website in a way that's easy to find, or setting up like a pop-up on your website that drives people directly to that specific page if necessary. And I'm getting the hook to get off stage. So with that, thank you all so much for joining our session today. Feel free to follow up with us again on Civics, civics-outreach at google.com. If you have any other questions, and I hope to see some of you all in future sessions. So thank you so much.